You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello everybody, back again here at Healing Voices Project. Thanks for coming with us once again. Today I have a friend, a guest, Frank Shea, who is the program director at the Agawam Counseling Center for BHN, Behavioral Health Network, and also another role, clinical practice director for couples and families.
Yes.
You're a busy guy, Frank.
Yeah, it's busy, but it's good.
And thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we've talked for a little while.
We have, yes.
And you've got a great group in Agawam.
We do.
And we had an event in July, and I guess 4 of your people were able to go. You were busy, as usual.
I was attending a training, right.
You couldn't.
My new role.
But here you are. So after all this time, joining us to talk about what you do at BHN.
Absolutely.
Your role as clinical practice director for couples and families. And how all this started, how you got to be in the role. Because when you've been in Agawam now for 18 years, you're not a young guy anymore.
No.
Just saying.
No, that's the reality.
And the point of saying that is you've been here for 18, but prior to that, you had another career.
I did.
Which is completely unrelated to what you do now, right?
Totally unrelated.
Yeah.
I was a computer programmer.
Computer programmer to what you do now, that's a leap.
A huge leap.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about a little bit of background for what you did back then, and then we'll get into how it evolved, how you got to do what you do, and then we'll dive into that. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
So, like when I, obviously when you're in school, college, I went to Tufts and I was looking for what I wanted to do, and I said, I kind of like computers. I kind of like this new technology at the time, not knowing where computers would go.
It was about 60 years ago?
Well, not quite that long.
I'm just kidding.
But,
no.
but people say that, and some people do say that to me.
But this is in the 80s?
It would be, I was like, 80s. It was in the 80s.
80s, yeah. Back when the technology was really evolving, and so...
Exactly. People did not have computers, did not have cell phones or anything like that. I mean, it was like this totally different era, it feels like.
So you were going as a software engineer.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of like, I had to do something, I wanted to do it, but I also realized that it wasn't something that was like, well, I liked it, I didn't love it.
You were passionate about it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So
logically, it made sense. But
right.
Passionate, emotionally, it didn't.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you can't stay in the field for 20 years without being good at it, so I was good enough, but, but it wasn't like something that drove me. Like, if I had to work extra, it bothered me, because, like, gee. And so, to me, it's like, I had to find something. So I kept looking for different areas, different careers, and finally, I was talking with a friend, a really good friend, who was, needing support and needing friendship, and he said to me, you'd make a really good therapist. And it kind of said, like, really? I said, I don't really have my act together. And I went like, no, I don't think so. And then finally 9/11 happened. And 9/11 is like, obviously was, for those of us old enough to remember, it was a really scary time, but also an interesting. There was a period there right after 9/11 where people came together, which seems today kind of strange, but it was like, and people really were attached. And it was like, there was a series of connections. People were really torn apart by what happened.
It brought people together,
exactly,
for sure.
It really did. And there was this period where people were listening, and what was I doing? I was like, being supportive. I was hearing people talk about things, and then it ended. That period, those few months ended, and it got back to the way things just kind of were. And I kind of missed that. And at one point, I was sort of talking. I was kind of in a crisis, and I was talking to a minister, and the minister said, "So what's stopping you from being a counselor?" And I went like, "Oh my God!" It's like I keep hearing this again and again. And I sat there and looked like, and so I mean, I couldn't deny it. And one person says, okay, whatever. But another person says, and it's like, I think I got to take a look at this. And the more I thought about it, and the more I began to delve in, I volunteered on a suicide hotline. And then
You volunteered at the suicide hotline?
Yes, I did. Samaritans, actually.
This is while you were working as a software engineer?
Exactly,
Okay,
yeah. And I just got to the idea of what happened. What can you do on especially an anonymous suicide hotline at the time?
Okay.
So you really couldn't, I'm a mandated reporter, but in that role I wasn't. So you could just listen to people talk on the phone, and maybe they were telling you something they were saying, maybe they weren't. But all you could do was listen and try to, help them see the positive. But it was interesting, that idea of sort of listening. And as I went down my journey, then I was at another workshop, totally unrelated, and people told me about how I was a listener. And it was like there was this workshop where they said, okay, I was in a small group over the weekend, and they said, at the end of the week, I said, say something positive about the group members. Say nothing negative. Say something positive.
About each person?
About each person.
Okay.
And they talked about how I listened. And
I mean, you heard that repeatedly.
I heard that repeatedly.
Yeah.
And then as they're talking, and it's like, it was all positive. And then one guy went, the way you listen, I feel like, like say you're there, you're here. It's like, I feel like you're with me here.
Okay.
And then one around, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? And I to other people in the group, and they all nodded. And I'm sitting here going and I can't hold on to they're not saying anything negative. Because if I could attach to the negative thing, I could ignore all the positive things they were saying, but I couldn't do that. And so it's just this idea that I couldn't deny that there was something that I was sort of like I was meant to do.
But this was also replacing the what was missing in your other career, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, all right.
This sense of passion. Here I am talking to this 20 years later, and I'm going and I still have the same feeling. I'm like, wow. I mean, I've accepted it now, but it was at the time it was this revelation. The word I would kind of describe would be it's what's called a calling.
Okay. Yeah.
And
you couldn't ignore it anymore.
I can no longer ignore it. It was the way you argue with whatever you believe, a deity.
But and that all is great, and it was sort of an awakening for you.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, the reality is, okay, now what?
Now you got to go to school.
Well, yeah, but you said I did that 20 years ago. I was in the software engineering, went to school, and now I got to start a new calling.
Right.
And I feel passionate about it, but it takes some schooling. It takes education, and it will take for lack of a better word, sort of an apprenticeship, meaning you have to work your way up into a position that probably at first didn't pay as well as your other job.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right.
Absolutely. It was definitely a big pay cut.
Yeah.
I was in a position where I was able to afford to do that, but I was looking at something that, was bothering me. I didn't really have the passion for it, whereas in this work that I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I can work extra in this job, and it doesn't bother me.
How long, and I know the answer, but I don't want to say it, how long has it been since you've been in this field now?
So I graduated from grad school in Antioch in 2007.
2007.
So it has been 18 years.
18 years, yeah. Almost as long as you were a software engineer, right?
Now, yeah, you're right.
Getting there.
You're right.
Yeah. So, any regrets?
None. Not one.
Not one.
On that, I mean, it was like one of the best decisions I made in my life to make that switch.
When you get up in the morning, you said earlier when you had to work extra, you were like, "Oh, I don't want to work extra. I don't want to work another day. I don't want to work longer than I have to."
Right.
Is that different now?
It's definitely different. I mean, obviously, there's the issue around self-care.
Yeah.
I mean, because you do need. I mean, the work is as wonderful as it is. It's still, it's draining. You need time to recharge. So, as far as the physical capacity, you definitely need time to take self-care.
Well,
yeah.
Right.
But with that,
you need to balance things. Right?
With that balance aside, as far as the actual work, if I do have to work extra, it's not as it's not as taxing or draining. It's not like I'm going I'm minding it like I could be doing something else.
So you started off, right now, you're program director for the Agawam Counseling Center, which is a part of BHN.
That's right.
And also you're a clinical practice director for couples and families. So you didn't start off doing it. You started off once you graduated in 2007.
Yeah, I wasn't in those roles.
You were not, no.
I was
So things evolved. What was your first role, and how did you sort of say, okay, here I am. What did you do right when you graduated?
Well, my title was a clinician, outpatient clinician, which, for all intents and purposes, a therapist.
Therapist, yeah.
So, basically saw people, couples, kids.
And did you find that as you were doing this, that the people who told you in the past, hey, you ought to think about this, did you find that, hey, you know what? I think they were right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you started to think, hey, this, and you started to enjoy the work.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go back to school at all, or just keep progressing with your job? In other words, did it require further degrees to advance?
Well, you do want to get, trainings and stuff like that. We are required as part of, once you get licensed, because you come out, you're not licensed, but you come in a couple of years, I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
Yeah.
And they require 30 hours of CEU training, basically trainings for every 2 years. So in that alone, you need to get exposure. And there would be find things that might interest me and stuff like that. So I took various things over the years.
Okay. So you started off as a counselor, therapist.
Yes.
And then you worked your way progressively into different roles. And
right. Well, another thing I found is that that we'd have like staff meetings, and the people would give, talk about cases.
Yeah.
And I found myself, listening and kind of like, having ideas and start to give that guidance. And like, I kind of like this, and that leads to supervision.
Yeah.
And I expressed an interest in that, and then it was like, here, why don't you try to supervise someone? And then someone else, and then before you know it, I have a title as
you're leading a team.
Then lead a team, but then obviously even that wasn't immediate. It was a progress. Supervise 1 people, 2 people, and then.
Right. But let's go back a little bit,
sure.
Because I'm always interested when people join this field. Is there anything like from your own personal history that helped you relate to this, or just the fact that you just found yourself passionate about this, or is there anything from your own background that you relate to people that you speak with?
Well, I think the thing is that for what happens, I think, is there's another thing that occurs in life, and this happened to me too, is that this, saying like, as I probably haven't heard Wayne Muller, you say there comes a moment in life where something happens, and usually it's a moment of suffering, where how you view the world is never the same.
Right.
It could be some sense of loss, and usually it's around a sense of loss.
Almost like what you described about 9/11 earlier.
Exactly.
But on a more collective basis, this is more individual.
Right. Yeah. And so my moment had come, before that. I had, was married. I had a divorce. It came unexpectedly. In retrospect, I should have known, but at the time I didn't. And but it came like, right. It was like that level of shock, and the grief I had to go through to get over that, I think, allowed me to have just a very different perspective. Because you don't take things for granted anymore.
When did that happen?
That happened about like 1999, 2000, so right before 9/11.
Oh, okay.
So when 9/11 happened,
it just compounded it. Right.
Well, for me, it was like my personal, not tragedy, because it really wasn't tragedy.
To you, it was.
Well, in the moment, right? In retrospect, no, but in the moment, it was.
Yeah.
And so I had to have so I guess in a way, obviously 9/11 impacted me, but in a way, my big impact is again what I had seen the world as before and what I've seen afterwards were very different. And what was also interesting, how people reacted to that, is that people have a hard time with suffering. Unfortunately, they don't, and so people kind of like, they weren't. It was interesting talking about it and how people kind of relate or not relate to it, and it really gave me a perspective. Like, wow, people have a real hard time with this, but guess what? Suffering is going to come to all of us as part of the deal, and so I guess what I'm saying is,
I think I know what you're saying too, because whether it's a personal tragedy, whether it's a divorce, a death, a sickness, any kind of crisis,
right.
Maybe, often people don't know how to react. They don't know what to say. It's uncomfortable.
Exactly.
And you're worried about saying the right thing, so sometimes people don't say anything. And then from your observations, it sounds like this is just something that you've observed, and there's an uncomfortable worse sometimes. People just get almost paralyzed. They don't know what to do. But you were sensing all this during your divorce, and then even after 9/11. You said you watched how people came together, and then sort of kind of goes back to normal. And then you followed through with your calling, and you got into this. And now, with all these years later,
Yes.
I'm sure, and I'm assuming, because when you have a passion for this and you continue your work, but your education and you progress with it, you learn all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
It's a constant,
the moment I stop wanting to learn and stop being curious, I need to be done.
Right. And I guess that's what it is, because you maintain that passion after all these years. So you found yourself at some point at BHN.
That's right.
You're a program director, Agawam Counseling Center. Tell us a little bit about what you do there, and what is the Agawam Counseling Center. And I know BHN, but explain who BHN is and who would go there and why.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the Agawam Counseling Center was founded in the early 70s, and it was really to be a resource to the community of Agawam. And it was like small, and at that time there was these small clinics that were forming. I think at the time they started to break down, close state hospitals, and people went out into the communities. And I think Outcomes was, it was a drop-in center at one point, but these small centers became really fiscally unsustainable with all the overhead and red tape and stuff like that. And so in the 90s it merged into Behavioral Health Network as Behavioral Network began to grow. So Behavioral Health Network is a larger service of mental health services, providing many, many levels. I mean, I don't even know all of them, to be honest with you. I mean, basically, substance abuse services, outpatient mental health, residential places, crisis services. There are just, so BHN is a large mental health provider in the community.
Yeah.
So who would go there would be people who have various mental health needs. I mean, people, again, with substance abuse issues, but also all sorts of mental health across the spectrum.
Could be depression,
mental
health issues, behavioral issues, substance abuse,
absolutely,
like you mentioned. And if somebody is going through any type of problem, it could be post-divorce, it could be anything.
Right, could be life circumstances they don't need a long time for, and just need some support around. Or it could be someone who has what we call a chronic mental illness that may need support, may not need weekly support, but may need check-ins or whatever the case is, or mental health. Or they might come for a period of time, leave, and then if they need another crisis, they'll come back.
You're strictly outpatient
at Agawam Counseling Center, yes.
Yeah, but you have groups, individual and group counseling.
So what we have is we have individuals serving all the spectrum of life, kids, adults.
Okay, kids as young as.
Well, at BHN can go, I'd say, a little bit below 4 or 5, but at the Agawam Counseling we probably go mainly 6 and older.
Oh wow, okay.
I mean, and obviously what you do with kids is different than what you're going to do with adults. Just how you do it. It's still therapy, but it's going to be like play therapy, that kind of thing.
Right, it's different. Yeah, it's different.
And as far as groups go, we do have a group out there that comes out of the Agawam Counseling Center, which is this Poi movement group. But we also, across BHN, there are many, many groups across all the spectrums of parent support groups, depression, DBT groups, etc. There's so many. And one
you
of the
said
things,
DBT?
DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy.
What is that?
So dialectic behavioral therapy is sort of a technique that came from Marshall Lenahan. It really is talking about how people can sort of cope with serious emotions and have ways that are sort of healthy ways of coping. Because a lot of people everything people do is a coping mechanism, but some coping mechanisms are detrimental. They have, negative side effects. For example, people who cut, right? That they're doing it for a reason. They're doing it to, alleviate some strain or stress. Or whatever.
It could be the cutting. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol.
Exactly.
It could be,
all those things, right?
Temper, anger.
Right.
Whatever,
all the ways that people cope. And I call them negative coping mechanisms because the side effects of these coping mechanisms are detrimental, and sometimes worse than what they're trying to alleviate.
Right.
And so DBT is going to provide techniques, and I'm not an expert at DBT, but they're going to provide techniques that are going to be healthy coping mechanisms that
replace
exactly
the detrimental ones.
Exactly, and hopefully then allow them to move forward and improve the quality of their lives.
In 18 years, have you seen any changes? What do you see over the course of your career now that is different now than it was 18 years ago?
That's a great question. I think the one thing I would say is what I have discovered and what I believe is no matter what the changes we're talking about, people remain people. And I think, in not in 18 years, I remember like when I was interning at a college counseling center, what I noticed is that I'm sitting, and I'm at this point, I'm in my 40s, and I'm sitting with these kids, and as I'm talking to them, I'm seeing me at that point.
Right.
And even then, back then,
Yeah.
the change, the technology changed, all those type of things. But at the end of the day, we're still people. So, I mean, there are lots of changes as far as the technology. I mean, a great example is like, what we're doing here. We're going to be online. The other fact is that before we didn't have telehealth, you didn't have video therapy, and now you
didn't have social media.
You didn't have social media. So there are those type of things that happen, and so the way we can provide services, we have different ways we can do it. People don't have to come to the counseling center anymore to get services. I mean, there are times where you still need to do it because there are some people that need to be in person because doesn't want to get services, but still, nevertheless, at the end of the day,
I find the in-person is more effective, I think. And I do it even when we're talking here. In person more effective because we have to do some Zoom podcast, and those are great, but it lacks the personal.
There's a dimensionalness.
The personal connection.
Yeah.
Always. So I think that it applies to the same thing. But I think one of the things, and maybe it's just my observation, but with the stresses of today, the environment of today, with social media, with the constant news cycle, with the access of drugs and all kinds of things, I see that there are so many centers for counseling, family counseling, couples, treatment centers, detox, more than there were 20 years ago, by far. And certainly that's a good thing. But the need seems to be greater because, in other words, I think if you were just check back 20 years ago, you can find a list of all these recovery centers and counseling centers now. 20 years ago, there wasn't a quarter of them, it wasn't a third of what they are. And I sometimes have to wonder, is it that there's more of a need now? And if so, why?
I mean, that's a good question.
It's.
I think one thing I would say is I think the other thing too is like, our field is like, 100 years old, say, cited quote unquote with Freud or whatever the case may be. But the reality was that Freud didn't come with this invention or other people, that people were always getting support. And I think, in the various ways that they would, I think, ministers, other people, community. And I think community was tighter back then.
Yeah.
So I think people got to spend, and the other thing too, but I think there's also, I think they're both as that. And also I think people were not quite always in touch with their emotions. I think the roles people had were very more defined back then. And I think that now that people are allowed to be more expressive, more individualistic, which is both a good and bad thing. I think that people are allowed to be more of who they are instead of being stuck into a role. But also coming with that is a sense of isolation. I think people are more separated than they ever were. And so they may not have the supports they used to have, so they have to reach out for them in other ways.
And I think you're getting to something, too, that I was thinking about as you were talking, too. People are certainly more free to talk about it because people will talk about it more openly than they used to.
Right.
The stigma is still a stigma, okay? But it's not nearly as intense as it was all those years ago. People would be afraid to talk about any mental health issues, about the depression they're going through, about the medication they have to take, about their substance use issues, about depression, and so on.
That's right.
People are at least freer to talk about it now because people are talking about it.
Exactly.
People say, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm going through this, and not as and also too isolation. I think that certainly, especially during COVID, I think that helped, that hurt.
I think COVID only exacerbated what was happening anyways.
Yes, but in a way, like I said, it might be a good thing anyway, because it did bring it out. It brought it out. People maybe be willing to talk about it more, because people were talking about it. Yeah, I'm depressed. I can't take this anymore. I can't take the isolation,
Right.
So I guess the fact that people are more open is a good thing, because then you can at least recognize, you can diagnose, you can seek help where you identify. Otherwise, people would just close in and not talk about it because they're afraid to.
Exactly.
And I think, and I'll ask you, just my opinion, do you think that stigma, do you think their reaction to people is changing?
As far as people being in therapy?
Well, the idea of being in therapy. People would not maybe freely admit that they're going to therapy 25 years ago, but now do you see people are more freely admitting?
There was absolutely a stigma in the past. I think that's much less so now.
Yeah.
I mean, now we have the other problem where, there's more demand than there are providers and services.
And that's amazing, because there's so many more providers than there used to be.
Yeah.
So go figure that.
But I know
I
what
think
you're saying, people
yeah.
are reaching out, which I think at the end of the day is a good thing, but how do we balance, having enough to be able to provide people the service they need when they need it? That's...
Yeah, and I think it's good because people will, you're right, the demand is high. And why is it high?
I think that's a good question. I don't think we fully have the answer to that.
Yeah, and that's I guess what I'm sort of getting at,
Yeah.
because what problems occur today that make that demand so high? And you could point to several things, social pressures, social media, and on, and also the fact that the recognition, the openness to talk about it. People will say, "Yeah, I'm seeing a therapist," and and a lot of people these days, I think, "Yeah, me too. Yeah, oh, you're seeing a therapist? How often do you see yours?" Or 20 years ago, people go, "Oh my gosh, you're seeing a therapist?" Whew.
So
it's different.
We can loop back to something that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The idea of suffering and how people deal with suffering.
Yeah.
That I think if we were more comfortable dealing with suffering, more comfortable around the topic of suffering.
Yeah.
Because we all have that in common. I gave you a little bit of what my suffering was, but I imagine you have it as well.
Of course.
And, the details are different, but the reality is that that's something we have in common. That's something we all have in common.
We all have in common.
And yet we don't own up to that. And I think if we were more comfortable dealing with suffering, if we were more comfortable, because that's something it's inevitable. It's part of the deal. It's part of the idea of being born. You're going to suffer. And so if we were able to be more comfortable with that, then there would probably be less need, because we'd be able to just share that with others.
And I guess even sometimes it's just a kitchen table discussion with your spouse, with your family, that sometimes in itself provides a little bit of therapy. You're like, oh, I feel good because I got that off my chest. It's a small thing, but if you're free to talk about it, it can help. It's almost like, small form of therapy, right? If you just talk about things, and so many people won't, and it gets worse.
So then I get into my role as a couples counselor.
Yeah.
We got also, I'm going to be a little contrary, we got to be careful about that as well, because a spouse is not a therapist. So it's like, so that's where...
Well, there's a good point, yes. Yeah. Because how dare you say that? And it can cause a reaction.
Exactly.
So and exacerbate the problem.
You want to be open, but, one thing in couples therapy you do with people, that's not your therapist. You know what I mean? It's like you want to be able to... So it's like there's a balance, right? Does that make sense?
That's a really good point, because it's one thing to be open and talk, but it's another to have some professional guidance.
Exactly.
Because you're right. Sometimes those discussions can exacerbate the problem because they didn't really understand what the person truly meant, and so sometimes there's a disconnect that causes worse problems. And it's not all, but often it's a misunderstanding. It's miscommunication. It's being a little too sensitive or overthinking, and
Well, there are all sorts of things, and you try to work that out, and hopefully the couple can work it out. And as a couples therapist, you try to guide that.
Yeah. How did you get into couples therapy, by the way?
Well, that's one of the things where you're kind of like you add in community mental health, and one of the real advantages of starting on community mental health is that, especially at a small place like the Agawam Counseling Center, it's like we have some things that we lean towards, especially wise, but you have to be able to do all sorts of people, because it's like people in Agawam, a lot of them want to be seen in Agawam. They don't want to be seen elsewhere. They want to be seen and that's certainly what I have found over the years. That this community, as you know, it's just, we're in this metropolitan area, but it's a small community, small town.
Right, yeah.
And so they wanted, so you get to get exposed to all sorts of things. And what I think I found in my beginning years, I got some couples I got to work with, and then I found that some I did well, but some not so well. But you kind of just learn that it's just a different way of doing therapy, and just being able to kind of, work out that balance, and realize a lot of it is, not all of it, is about communication, how people talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in couples, we learn that, from various issues that we like to scream, right? And it's like, but what happens is, like, if we were, like we have a good calm tone, we're having this conversation, but, if we were at the yelling age, that'd be a very different dynamic, a very different tone. And I think that a lot of people, I'm not saying that's the only issue with how some people communicate when they're angry and upset, is that it actually, they think it helps whatever problem they have, but it doesn't. It makes it worse. So how people communicate with each other is very important. I mean, that's not the only dynamic that occurs that needs to be worked on.
But it's a good example.
Right, but it's a very good example. And if you get to that, you get people talking differently to each other.
Yeah.
And the idea of that, here we are, if we were, mostly if we had our emotions up, we were, had angry or a little activated, and we're sitting and want to make a point, so we're making a debate, but we're not actually listening. So here we are, we're listening to each other. But if we weren't listening to each other, and we said, like, I have to get my point across, and I'm more concerned about getting my point because I am about, listening to what you have to say, because, I think we can see here, people that look at we were talking, right? I said something, you responded to that. You said something, and it sort of changes how we're having a conversation as opposed to a debate. And I think when you look at how a lot of couples, when they're fighting, they think they're having a debate. And that's...
Sometimes it's a competition. Yeah.
Well, there's that too, right?
Yeah,
Which to me makes, when you look at it, it's like a couple's supposed to support each other, it's supposed to be a team. But yet, a lot of them, they kind of lose sight of that. So hopefully they come and if they need support, they come in enough time where you can begin to sort of repair that and hopefully get people back, on the right track. But so I have found that it was just a different way of doing therapy, whereas, because you can get people to be happy, right, or couples to be happy, then that's a big level towards their happiness, and I think there are all sorts of ways people can live their lives. Some people can be happier being single and stuff like that, and having friends and all that. And
sometimes you have to say, what, this is the direction that's going to work for you.
Whatever it might be, but I do think a lot of people get satisfaction in successful relationships. They find the right person. There's a lot of happiness that comes from that.
Do you ever get frustrated with your work and say, I can't take it anymore?
I would never say not take it anymore. Because frustrated, sure. I mean that's going to come from various levels. But what was described to me a few years ago, again before I made this career change, is that when you look at any career, there's a lot of stuff that you don't want to do, a lot of stuff that is frustrating. But when is the frustrating parts of that career? When is it that the work you're doing is so valuable, so fulfilling, that while that frustrating stuff is there, it just doesn't matter as much.
And I guess conversely too, what keeps you going? What makes you feel good at the end of the day?
Well, two things that I am helping people, and like one of the reasons why after 18 years I'm licensed, stuff like that, I could have gone off into private practice, and I think, and that could have happened, but it did not end up happening. And I think one of the reasons why is because I think I'm able to train therapists. The therapists come, and so to be able to help them grow, and some we want them to stay because we want to have be each other, be great fit, and some therapists do, and that if I'm helping those therapists, then they're helping, say, their caseload of people, and then if they don't say, they go out into the community, they're helping them with the idea that I've had a role in their training. So I could have gone to private practice and had whatever caseload, number 20, 30 people at a time and help those people. But now in a way, I'm influencing so many more people.
It's a good point. Yeah. And you may never know how many people, but by virtue of your training, there's other people who are helping. So you're really expanding. It's having a greater, wider influence.
Yes, exactly.
With that, that's great. So again, it's the Agawam Counseling Center.
Yes.
If somebody wanted to find out more about, what the counseling center is all about, how is it right for them, or about couples therapy, how would they get in touch with you?
So a couple of places. First of all, as we're part of BHN,
BHN again, and I see you're on your switch. You remind me.
Behavioral Health Network.
Yes. Behavioral Health Network. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, not to divert, but Agawam Counseling Center at the BHN. How would people get in touch?
Well, you go onto the website bhninc.org.
BHN
Inc.org. Yes. Yeah. Or excuse me, you can call us at Agawam Counseling Center 413-786-6410.
786-6410.
Correct.
Okay, and that's if they want to find out about counseling, couples therapy,
or individual therapy, across the spectrum of life. We are taking appointments. Someone can call, and we set things up through the state's help. We have the CBHC, Community Behavioral Health Center, and we're a BHUC, Behavioral Health Urgent Care Center.
Okay.
And the idea is that people can call and they can get an initial appointment, and obviously depending upon the insurance. And the idea is getting that right away, as opposed to
what would be an urgent care situation.
Well, urgent care is going to be so there's crisis. Crisis is the idea that say I'm suicidal, or I'm
Okay.
That would be that's a crisis. But urgent care would be like, I have a need that can't wait, and I really need to talk to someone today.
And if that's
tomorrow.
the case, are your phone lines open 24/7?
Well, no, crisis is, but we're open. So the hours of the thing is very at BHN. We have 2 CBHUCs that are located in Springfield and Westfield, and those are open. Let's see if I get the hours right. 8 to 8 Monday through Friday, and 9 to 5 Saturday and Sunday. Those are their larger sites, and we have a place like the Agawam Counseling Center, which is a BHUC urgent care center, and we're open. I believe it's 9 to 8 or 8:30 to 8 Monday through Thursday, and 9 to 5 on Friday,
Okay.
and then the second and fourth Saturday of the month, we're open 9 to 1.
And I guess if somebody wants to know more, certainly they can go on the website, bhninc.org.
That's right.
They can go on there, then you can find out, but because it's hard to remember all that. However, but most days, Monday through Thursday, and then a few less hours on Friday, they could call, and if it's urgent care, at least they can find somebody to
urgent
address
or routine care.
Or routine,
because most people that we find called are not crisis.
Most
urgent
times
care.
it's not urgent.
It's like
but,
they need they want to talk to them to work through an issue, but it's not immediate. It's not like they got to do it today.
Yeah. You're in Feeding Hills?
Feeding Hills is right.
Yeah. And it's easy, especially for somebody in Agawam. I mean, you're right, because a lot of people prefer somebody local, right? Well, that's good to know you're there. And I think people listening, anything is just worth a phone call to find out. And sometimes just a phone call to say, what, here's what I'm going through, here's what I'd like to do. Is this something that's appropriate, that's right? And then you talk through, because everybody's trained to say, okay, no, sure, we can talk with you, we can meet with you. Or if the situation warrants it, maybe you just redirect them somewhere else.
Well, I mean, it depends. We can do that as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, if people want to come in, they can, so we'd set them an appointment, and then they can decide, gee, it's just something that will be helpful to them.
Right.
And sometimes it can be, 1 or 2 sessions, or it could be longer. It depends on where it is. Because sometimes, you're able to just talk things through quickly, and then obviously, we do take insurance. We take all sorts of insurance. So,
That's good to know.
Yeah. Because a lot of people need to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
'cause paying out of pockets is a bit much for most people.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a yeah. Well, that's all great. Great information. It's helpful to know, especially for local people. Well, great. I think we kind of covered a lot about what you do, and I appreciate you coming on and talking about your journey into this, and keep going. I have a feeling you're just going to keep plugging away at this. And
For as long as I can.
is there? Well, Frank, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you very much.
You're welcome. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And everybody who's listening, thanks for coming on, and we'll keep this going and talk to you all soon.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.